Your viewing of the veterans is made possible due to the proud and heartfelt support of the Power Workers Union.
All Canadians can take pride in the outstanding achievements of our Canadian Armed Forces. For 200 years, in campaign after campaign, they have represented the very best of our great country. They are famous for their bravery, their determination, their compassion. And most important, they represent a military tradition that is all about selflessly advancing the highest Canadian values: freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. That's the big picture. But our history can also be told one veteran at a time. For every warrior has their story. And that's why I'm so excited about this series. We have a unique opportunity to hear the personal stories of courage from men and women who freely answered duty's call. I congratulate the makers of this series on our veterans and those who supported them financially. They have preserved voices that deserve to be heard. They will be an inspiration for us all, now and forever.
Hello, I'm Senator Pamela Welland. This documentary series is about war. Different wars, different times, different places, different generations, but always the same story. A story of young men and women, their bravery, their willingness to risk it all, to defend their country and the values that define it. We, in a sense, as a nation, have come of age on their backs. Because of their efforts, because of their bravery, because of their sacrifice, we have found a place at the international table of nations, and we have now a powerful voice. The veterans will not always be with us, so this is their chance to tell us our own story and our own history in their own words. Unvarnished truth. Sometimes the pictures won't be pretty. But this is the story of a nation that has fought for its future. We owe these veterans a debt of gratitude for everything that they have done for us. So now, here is the story of Canada's Veteran Force.
Hello, I'm Daniel Roderick, and welcome to the Veterans for a look at Canada's military past through the eyes of those who were there. In this episode, we're going to be making the big push through Northwest Europe with the Canadian troops that fought at places like Kapell-Chavir and Bergen-op-Zoom, and we're going to be witnessing what had happened through the eyes of Captain Danny McLeod, who was with the South Alberta Regiment, and Lance Corporal Ken Rowland, who is with the Lincoln and Welland Regiment. And now, here's Danny and Ken as they recount their experiences in Northwest Europe here on the Veterans.
When I was 4 days before I was 14 years old, I joined the Lincoln and Welland Regiment through my father. He was a sergeant in the Lincoln and Welland Regiment. This is in militia days. And from there, it wasn't, we went to Niagara Camp for a few days, camping. And after that was over, then we trained 2 days a week at the armories in the signal section, learning the Morse code and also telephones and that sort of thing. There were no radios at that time within the regiment. And up until that time, and then suddenly, in 1939, they suddenly mobilized the regiment, active. And of course, I was only 14 then, and we went on the Welland Ship Canal doing guard duty. November of '39, they decided they needed men right away to go over to England because there was some problems there. The French weren't doing too well, and the British were desperate for help. So they kind of broke up the regiment and took everybody eligible over 19 or over. And of course, I was only a kid and I was kind of out of it. But anyway, I just hung around the armories more or less at that time. And the next thing I know, in 1940, they mobilized the regiment again. So they call me up and say, Ken, we're going active. So here I am, active again.
Well, what happened was D-Day took place on the 6th of June, and they had to get a bridgehead large enough to bring an armored force into the bridgehead. And it wasn't until mid-July before we started getting into position on the continent. And our first involvement was at Borgabus Ridge and Verrières Ridge. The whole idea was armored was to come in and provide mobility, shock action, and power their way the rest of the war.
We didn't hear a lot, to be honest with you, about D-Day. We didn't hear a lot. They had us confined to an area. We didn't even know when we were going to Normandy. But they were sending these buzz bombs over. The fact that these buzz bombs, they send up aircraft to try to divert them from England. Hit a wing or something and they'd come down short. Obviously, this is what happened. And what happened, they diverted one of these buzz bombs, the aircraft, the fighter aircraft, and one came down and landed in our cookhouse. Just around time they were having their dinner, like the company, it was B Company, by the way, and killed 9 men and wounded, I think it was 18 others. But that was just before we left for France. When we landed in France, now, as I say, I was a signaler. And when we walked, we carried an 18 set on our back, which was about 38 pounds. And you had well, they gave us rifles. Now, how can a guy operate a radio and fire a rifle? I don't know. Well, anyway, suddenly the rifle disappeared. You know, and when we did get a weapon, it was a Sten gun, basically. You know, that you could handle it, you know. But anyway, from there, the first night, we, of course, were bombed. You know, at that stage, they're still bombing. And it's quite an experience, you know, being out in the field and they're dropping the bombs around. But anyway, we had a couple of guys hit, but other than that, we were all right. And then the next thing we do, we march into Borgabus at night. And we get there and all hell's breaking loose. They're shelling like you wouldn't believe. And I'm in the carrier. I'm now assigned to the colonel, Colonel McQueen, as his operator. You know, I was there, but I don't remember them as vividly as I do the others. I don't know why. Now, Falaise you're talking about, like I remember Trun quite well, you know. But the other little villages that we were taking, they don't seem to ring that much of a bell. And I was there. I don't know why, you know. Maybe it was the fact we'd never seen any people, you know. We didn't see any civilians. Yeah, that's true. So that's why it doesn't imprint on my mind as much as some of the others, you know. I think the biggest thing about Falaise was why we weren't so, it was so stinky and so hot, and cows were dead with their feet in the air and they're belching out their bodies, more or less, killed. I mean, this is what you didn't want to. It was just terrible. Terrible, right in August. I think maybe this had something to do with it. You weren't really, you just wanted to get away from it all. You couldn't stand it. Yeah. I mean, we'd be riding on the backs of tanks, for instance, in some cases, and they'd be running over dead bodies with their tracks. You know, I mean, and what are you going to do? You can't do anything.
It wasn't long before we felt the presence of our commanding officer. Strange enough, he loved war. And he had an organization which gave the Armored Regiment its name, Recce. There would be jeeps with machine guns. There would be scout cars, there would be light tanks, there would be Chaffee tanks, and even Ack-Ack tanks. All he made use of, and he was on top of every situation. And as the brigadier once said, he not only runs the brigade, but also the division. But his gathering battlefield intelligence was phenomenal. And he was on top of the situation, and if he was sending someone into a particular situation, you could look over your shoulder and there he is. How's it going? How can we help? Have you tried this? Etc. So that throughout the war, he was a godsend to our regiment.
Colonel Crum came to us after McQueen was relieved, and he took over, and I was his signaller then, you see. And we wound up in Trun. Now, C Company was the SAR regiment. It was having some problems, you know, and they were at this river, and the Argylls were with them, and they needed more reinforcements. So they sent C Company down there to give them, stiffen it up a bit from our regiment, because we weren't fighting that badly for Trun. We were trying to close the gap, you see, and it was terrible in there. It was they were shelling, and the Germans were trying to get out. They wanted to give up. You know what I mean? They're going to be killed, and it was awful. And it was in August, and it was hot, and the stench was unbelievable. And this is where the commander, I can't think of his name, Curry, I believe. Curry got the VC. He was in the SARs. And that's when our guys went down there to help him out. Yeah, everything worked out good, you know, and he really earned it, you know, really a battle there, yeah.
We went, we got involved in several individual battles Tilly-la-Campagne, Sinthau, Quasney Wood, etc. We did not play a big role in the night attack because we were dealing with all the small targets, which turned out to be very large targets in the final analysis. But once we finished our job, we were the closest to Falaise of any formation, including those who were involved in Operation Totalize. It was decided then that they were maybe making the wrong move. The Americans were coming from Alcon up to Falaise. We were going down from Caen to Falaise. And they didn't seem to realize that the German armor, Panthers and Tigers, would not be stopped by anything we had. And so they changed their mind and decided to corral the Germans in a pocket at Falaise, and that changed the role for us into the lead again, taking Trun, and then because of the urgency, Dave Curry, my squadron commander who won the VC, was dispatched to St. Lambert, losing 2 officers on the way, then two when he got there, including his battle captain. He ended up with no officers and some sergeants, and I think a WO, in one of the stickiest situations of the whole war. And if you're talking about a VC, it was the one, I don't say the only one, but it was a VC that fulfilled the 10 requirements of a Victoria Cross. And he served with us from there through to Belgium, and to Bergen-op-Zoom, then to Steenbergen, and the word came through that his VC was to be presented. He was driven off in a scout car, then a jeep, and to a DC-3, flown to England in his tank suit into Buckingham Palace, and King George VI presented him with the Victoria Cross. And of course that was the last act. Once you've won the VC, you're removed from battle.
We went into Bergen-op-Zoom. It was a rainy day when we went in there, and then we went to the, as I say, we got to Hotel de Drac. And from Hotel de Drac, I was with B Company at that time, and my buddy Roscoe was with me. I had him as a partner. And we had joined the Army about the same time, the active Army, back in 1940. And we were real buddies. But anyway, we went into Bergen-op-Zoom, him and I, and we were with B Company. We got in there, we were on a radio, we went into a school. We captured a school, our company, B Company, and Major McCutcheon was our company commander at that time, and he was an excellent commander. And we got in there, and he wanted, we couldn't get across the street. Like there was a river on the other side of a row of houses, okay? And we're in this school, and we're going to attack across the street and try to occupy these houses. The object was to get on the other side of the river. And what happened, he sent a section over, you know, to try to take this one house, and they were wiped out. So he realized that they're loaded with enemy in those houses. We got to have something stronger. So anyway, he has me radioed back to BHQ, and in turn they get to the artillery, and they give them the coordinates where we are, and artillery comes back with, they can't do it. The distance is too close. They'll destroy us as well as destroy the Germans, you know. And they wouldn't do it. So anyway, the company commander says to me, and Roscoe, he says, look, he says, you may as well shut down your radio because we're going to be here for a while. He said, what I want you guys to do is go back to Hotel de Drac. That's where our headquarters was. And he says, get some equipment. We're going to have you run in a telephone line and a telephone. Bring up a telephone for us, so because we won't have to use the radio because they'll pick us up, you know. So anyway, this is what we did. We went back. Now, I never seen the front of this school that we're in. We went in the back way, you see. And we went back, and we got our equipment, our coils of wire and our telephone. And we're working our way back. And it wasn't that far away from Hotel de Drac. But anyway, we're stringing the wire along, and the people, the Dutch people, you know, this is really, you know, like their part was like our liberation, like the war was over for them, you see. And they were coming out on the streets and they were hugging you, and you know, it was really something great for us too, you know. But anyway, we're going along, and we get across the street, and there's a hedge, and inside this hedge is a wooden post, like it's kind of a, you know, like a farmer's fence type thing, you know. And then there's the trees about that big all the way along, just inside the street. So anyway, what we were doing was hooking the line up onto a branch of a tree so that any vehicles going could get by, like tanks and stuff like that. So anyway, I said to Roscoe, I said, he was down below, and I'm standing up on this hedge, on the top of this hedge, with my foot down on the post. You know, it didn't stick up through the hedge. And I got one arm on the tree, on the limb of the tree, and I called down to him, throw up the coil of wire. And just then, unbeknown to me, a machine gun opens up, a German machine gun. And he hit some leaves on the top of my head. He seen me, and he heard me. Well, I was just about ready to jump down, and when I said this, throw it up first, and I guess the guy heard me and spotted me. But anyway, he opened up, he was firing too high. So anyway, I jumped down. He couldn't see Roscoe. The hedge was higher than what Roscoe was. And anyway, when I jumped down here, he'd been shot here in his arm, you know, and I couldn't believe, you know, he fell down, and I jumped down and grabbed him and kind of laid him down. I was going to bandage him up. And then all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. All the artillery opened up. You know, our own artillery. And they were coming down on the bloody street. Boom, 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 blowing like hell. And our company sergeant major, he come tearing down the road in a Jeep. And he says, come on, you guys, get in the Jeep. You're going to get killed, you know. And so I grabbed Roscoe and I run like the devil, you know, to get in the Jeep. And his head fell back. And he had one of these camouflage nets that we had, and he had it on his neck as a scarf. And when his head fell back like that, he had a bullet hole right through there. And he was dead. And that was it. Nothing ever forgotten. Good stuff. I always think of Roscoe. I had no brothers. He was my brother. That's true. No, I think of him all the time.
We went from Steenbergen to Kapellschevere. The British tried to take it, didn't make it. The Poles tried to, didn't make it. But the 4th Armored Division and the SCRs and the Algonquins and Argylls and the Lincoln and Wellands finally took it. Questionable whether it ever should have been taken, because the casualties were fierce, the worst kind of weather.
There was a lot of training done for Kapellschevere, you know, and of course, I being in the SIGs, I wasn't involved that much in it. You know, like they trained guys to paddle canoes down the river and that sort of thing. That I was never involved in. It didn't work out, you know. But anyway, what happened to us? Like 3 days before the attack was to take place, it was well planned, you know. And 3 days before the attack took place, they had us net in our radio sets, you see, which we did. And then we went shut down, and we weren't allowed to, you know, set them back on until we got on the dike. And then we could open up, because the Germans knew we were there then, you see, to communicate. So anyway, there was another signaler with me, and we worked two guys worked together. And one guy would, with the 18 sets, what you have to do, if you go off frequency, then you got it on your back, this thing. It sticks out about that much. And you're carrying it with a harness. And I'm going along, and the other guy's my partner, and we alternate day about carrying this thing. But anyway, we're going along, and the smoke is being fired on the dike. And you can't really see anything, you know what I mean? It's all mucked up, you know what I mean? You can't really see anything. And we got up on the dike, and we're running along the dike, and I start calling, you know, hello, Jig 2, report my signals, over, you know, nothing. And I kept repeating this, and nothing was happening. So I said to my buddy, I said, this is no good. We were wearing snowsuits, so there's snow on the ground. And so anyway, I sat down on the dike, and my legs are down this way on the dike, on the, that'd be the south side of the dike. And I said, try and net me in. You know, he can adjust them. You know, and I'm sitting there with the kid on. And he's turning the knobs, and I'm yelling, hello, Jig 2, and report my signals and this sort of thing. Getting nowhere. Suddenly, boom, 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 and there's about 4 explosions. The Germans are throwing hand grenades at us. They obviously got off the dike and went down on their side of the dike, you know, and started throwing these bloody hand grenades at us because I was shouting. And I said to him, let's get the hell out of here. And I rolled around, you know, and here he is laying there. He got hit, and the blood's coming out of his suit. And so anyway, I went to get the shell dressing out of his helmet to bandage him up. And he said, don't touch me, don't touch me, don't touch me. And so anyway, I started yelling for stretcher bearers, you know. And they came along the dike, and they grabbed him and took him away. I never seen that guy again until about 30 years after the war. And he came down to the reunion. And that's the first time I'd seen that man since that day. Now, after that happened, the smoke started to clear up. I left the radio, you know, just as soon as they got him away. I left the radio and I run like hell. I dumped off the radio, it wasn't working. Run like hell, and I found an empty slit trench. I jumped into it. And it was only about 20 feet from where I'd been, you know, where they'd thrown the damn grenades at us. And I jumped in the hole. And I'm in the hole in this German slit trench. And The next thing I know, as I say, things cleared, and we had a company commander. He was really good, really a good company commander. And he came along at the bottom of the dike. You know, the dike's quite high. It's as high as this ceiling, you know, and it's sloped like that. We couldn't get any vehicles up on the dike. But anyway, he's coming along and he says, "Is you okay? Is everybody okay? Call out, call out." He don't know where his men are, you see. And I yelled out, you know, "It's Ken Rowland, it's Rowland." He says, "Do you need any help?" I said, "Yes, yes, give me some help. I'm all alone." You know, I yelled down because you had to watch because the Germans are firing machine guns across the top. You stand up, you know. So anyway, he did. He sent me up a guy. And a fellow, I didn't know what his name was. And he got in the trench with me. He wasn't there 15 minutes. He got boom, boom, shot through right in here. The bullet come out back here. And they were both just back up in here where the went in and came out. Well, what happened, the Germans were reinforcing across the river onto our island, you see. And aircraft come down, and somebody got a hold of the aircraft, and they came down, they were blowing them up. And when they started blowing them up, the Germans stopped firing, you know. And when they stopped firing, we stood up and watched these guys being blown up, these Germans, you know, with the rockets the guys were sending. And so anyway, just as soon as it was over, I dropped back in the trench. You know, they started up again. And here's Bob Dewey was his name. He's down in the bottom of the trench, and he squatted down, and he's white as a sheet, and the blood's trickling out of here and out of the corners of his mouth. Just not bad. So he says, "Am I going to die?" And I looked at him and I said, "No, Bob, you're going to be okay." And I didn't say Bob. I didn't know who his name was. And I said, "No, you're not going to die. You're going to be all right." So I bandaged him up just wrapped it around his head and tied a knot in the top of his head, you know, and sent him out. I never knew his name until 20 years after the war.
I can say that I can't ever recall anyone being in front of us until we hit the Hochwald Gap, and unfortunately we got mired down, and the poor old infanteers had to carry on their own. But that was the one time in the whole of the war.
It was kind of an unusual type thing, the Hochwald. When we went in there, they were shelling, the Germans were shelling the area that we were in. And what it was, there was some bush there, and one of the signalers that was with me, he was in the edge of the bush when they started shelling, and he got hit, and out he went, you know. And then I took over, and then from there, we pulled out of there. We weren't there too long, and then we pulled out of there, and then we went up to a place called Dean. It's a smaller area, and we went in there, and it didn't seem like it was going to be much of a fight. You know what I mean? And I was with B Company at that time, and you know, they have 3 platoons in a company, a rifle company, and the one lieutenant who had his platoon, they were giving us covering fire as we went up a ditch, you know, with some trees in it. And then we got up, and they were shooting across this field, you see, like to draw the attention away from us, you see. We got up there okay. Nobody was shooting at us or anything. We get to this, like a house. This is in Germany, right? And what happens, we got into this house. When we get into this house, then the Germans opened up on us. They started shooting from the house next door. You know, this house that we got under, there was nobody in it. No, they seem to, they're all brick too, you know, and they're shooting at it. And the officer that was in charge, you know, in this platoon that he had, he said to one of his, two of his men actually, he said, and the tank was coming up the road. You know, there was, Germans had captured one of our Sherman tanks. In fact, they captured two of them. And they were coming down the road, one behind the other, quite slowly, you know. And for some reason or other, the officer knew it wasn't one of our tanks, you know. And so he said to these two guys, he says, get out there by that hedge, he says, and bang that tank, you know, with a peat. They're dangerous things to operate, you know. But anyway, they did. They knocked it out. They knocked out that tank. The other guys that were given the covering fire, the Germans never fired back at them at all. So the officer figured, well, you know, it's okay, we'll start crossing the field now, which didn't work out. They opened up. As soon as they got it, they let them get over the fence and start coming forward to cross the field, and they opened up on them. We had a lot of casualties there. But that's my vivid memory of the Hochwald Forest. A month before the war ended, 30 days before the war ended, I got the mumps. The best thing that ever happened to me. I was taken out to the hospital. Yeah. That was the end of the war for me.
General Fawkes, General Kitching, Prince Bernhard signed the treaty, but they were also the people who 5 weeks before organized the Great Relief for Utrecht, Rotterdam, and Amsterdam, when they poured convoys after convoys into these places with food because they were dying, starving to death at a rate of about 1,100 a day. You have to take into account, I think we're into about the 145th casualty. In both World War I and World War II, you were losing them about every 9 minutes. So the possibilities, and we didn't have the television, the communications that we have now. From the time the soldier is a fallen soldier, you have the media, you have television, they are followed back to Canada, they are taken from Trenton to Toronto, they are taken to the homes of these people, and there's a colorful coverage of their funerals, and he deserves full marks. I only hope that Canada learns that they have played an outstanding role. World War I, we were second to none. We were key to all the 5 major battles and produced probably the greatest general there. The numbers, when you go across the country and you start at the Somme and you go to Thiepval, 55,000 unknown graves. You go to Beaumont Hamel, where the Newfoundlanders were totally wiped out. You go into Courcelette, where the first tanks were used. You then go to Vimy, which it was the Canadians took. It was the Canadians that took Passchendaele. It was the Canadians who led the way in the last 100 days of the war, with the Brits on the left flank, the French and the Americans under their control on the right flank, the people who made it through to Mons, where they signed the armistice, was the Canadians. So no one, and I repeat, no one performs better than the Canadians. So it's a situation much similar in World War II. The thing is with war, you can stand to see an adult killed, but one of the tug-of-wars is when, in the course of fire, children are killed. This never sits too well. When you see the damage that is done, and a war that resulted in 55 million people being killed, thank goodness we've had 65 years of common sense and keeping a lid on upstarts that would try to trigger another war, because the next one would be a total wipeout. The time has come to come up with a balance so that no one has the or feels they have the strength to take on the other.
Well, there's so many ways it can go. How does war happen? You know, why do people get involved in wars? I wouldn't want any of my children to be involved in it. No, absolutely not. I'd do everything in my power for them not to. But at least the way I went through it anyway. You know? That's the way I feel about it. No. I feel it's totally unnecessary.
And that's our look at the big push through Northwest Europe through the eyes of Danny McLeod and Ken Rowland. Remember, the best way to pay tribute to those young men and women who served this great nation is to take the time to hear the stories of what they had gone through to make this world a better place for all to live in. Thank you for joining us and watching The Veterans.